يتعلموا دينهم وأن يتفقهوا في دينه. كل واحد من الرجال والنساء عليه يتفقه في دينه، عليه يتعلم ما لا يسعه جهله، هذا واجب، لأنك مخلوق لعبادة الله، ولا طريق إلى معرفة هذه العبادة ولا سبيل إليها إلا بالله، ثم بالتعلم والتفقه في الدين. فالواجب على المكلفين جميعا أن يتفقهوا في الدين وأن يتعلموا ما لا يسعهم جهله، كيف يصلون، كيف يصومون، كيف يزكون، كيف يحجون، كيف يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر، كيف يعلمون أولادهم، كيف يتعاونون مع أهليهم، كيف يدعون ما حرم الله عليهم، يتعلمون. يقول النبي الكريم عليه الصلاة والسلام: من يريد الله به خيرا يفقهه في الدين.
بالعلم بل بالأدب تنال أعلى الرتب، فعش حياة العلماء وقرأ صنوف الكتب، ودم على تواضع لا تفتخر بالنسب، كفاك أن تخرج من دنيا الورى بالحسب.
يا طالبا للعلم يرجو نفعه، اسمع نصيحة ناصح معواني، أخلص لربك في أمورك كلها، فالمخلصون هم أولو العرفان. فالجهد في جمع العلوم يضيع إن حل الرياء دواخل الإنسان، واحفظ زمانك رأس مالك إنه هبة العظيم الواحد المنان. ساعات يومك منحة ذهبية والناس بين الربح والخسران، وعليك بالخلق الكريم مع التقى، وعليك بالأدب الرفيع الشان، واحفظ كتاب الله واستمسك به، فالعلم كل العلم في القرآن، واطلب صغار العلم قبل كباره، واحفظ متون العلم بالإتقان. وإذا طلبت العلم فاعرف قدره، وأت البيوت أخي من البيبان، جالس شيوخ العلم وانهل منهم، واظفر أخي بالعالم الرباني، واحفظ وداد الشيخ صاح، فإنه بعد الأبوة في المقام الثاني، من لم يوقر شيخه أستاذه آلت عواقبه إلى الخذلان. واعمل بعلمك في شؤونك كلها، واشغل زمانك في رضا الرحمن، وأمر بمعروف وحارب منكرا، كن ناصحا للناس كل زمان. وإذا بلغت من العلوم نصابها أد الزكاة أخي بلا كتمان، علم مريدا للعلوم وقل له يا مرحبا بوصية العدناني، صلى عليه الله ما فاح الشذا دوما بريح المسك والريحان، صلى عليه الله ما فاح الشذا دوما بريح المسك
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي صير الدين مراتب ودرجات وجعل للعلم به أصولا ومهمات، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله، بشر وأنذر، لا خير إلا دل الأمة عليه، ولا شر إلا حذرها منه، فصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهداه إلى يوم الدين. نسأل الله جل وعلا أن يبصرنا بالحق وأن يمن علينا بالالتزام به والثبات عليه حتى يتوفانا وهو راض عنا. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا وقلبا خاشعا وعملا متقبلا. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فينا شقيا ولا محروما. اللهم آمين. All praise is due to Allah. We praise Him, we worship Him, we seek His assistance, we seek His tawfiq. We pray to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala to teach us that which is beneficial to us. And we pray to Him to give us the tawfiq to apply it. فإنه من يرد الله به خيرا يفقهه في الدين. اللهم فقهنا في الدين. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. Tonight is the 28th of Safar of the year 1444 since Hijrat al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, which translates into the 24th of September of the Gregorian calendar 2022. I pray to Allah Azza wa Jal to make this night a blessed night and to make all the brothers and sisters who are physically with us in this masjid or who might be tuning in live, I pray to Allah Azza wa Jal to make them mubarakeen, blessed in themselves and in their families. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep giving us the tawfiq to sit around these circles of knowledge, which are circles of dhikr of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala, which are majalis mubarakah, blessed gatherings and sittings that are witnessed by the angels, showered by the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal. And I pray to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our ja'iza when we are done here, our reward when we are done here, that it will be said to us, go for you have been forgiven. Allahumma ameen. This is the 27th majlis of the commentary on the textbook titled Ta'ظيم العلم, glorifying knowledge, which authored by Sheikh Saleh ibn Abdillah ibn Hamad al-Usaimi, one of the senior scholars of Saudi Arabia and a teacher in Al-Haramain al-Sharifain, Al-Masjid al-Haram and Al-Masjid al-Nabawi. على صاحبه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. Before we get started into the commentary, inshallah, this is something that you keep seeing me or noticing that I keep reiterating every now and then. And one of the things that really saddens me is that we see the dwindling number of attendees of this halaqah. To be frank with you, ever since the pandemic started, and when we restarted the halaqah, jazakallahu khairan, when we restarted the halaqah in the masjid after a while of doing it online because of the pandemic, the numbers have never recovered to pre-pandemic levels, if you wish. And it is really sad. It is really sad because it's just an indication of that we do not appreciate the importance and the value of these majalis al-ilm. Wallahi, it is sad. It is sad after we keep reiterating and reminding ourselves about the importance of these majalis al-ilm and the great reward that is reserved for those who attend it, that we still don't see many people really are interested and are patient enough to sit and bend their knees and sit around these circles of knowledge to learn about the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. We claim that we love Allah Azza wa Jal, but we're not interested in learning His deen. Go figure. So we claim we love Allah Azza wa Jal, but we're not interested at the same time in learning His deen, nor and the necessity of that we don't actually obey Him the way He should be obeyed, and we don't fear Him the way He should be feared, because that comes from Al-Ilm. Fear of Allah Azza wa Jal, taqwa of Allah Azza wa Jal, إقامة الأوامر, to fulfill the orders and stay away from the prohibitions. It really comes out of the knowledge. If you don't know, then you don't practice. I think that's obvious. So it is really sad that we're not, like I said, we're not seeing, there are a lot of faces that we used to see, not anymore. I know we broadcast live, but that, like we always say, this is never meant to be a replacement of physically being here. This is not meant to be a replacement, or take it easy and stay, comfortable at home and say, I'll just watch online. That's good, but it shouldn't be a replacement of physically being here, because the reward is never the same. Unless you have a good reason for not being able to come, then yes. But in general, if you're able to come, there's no reason why not to join in physically, and the reward will never be the same. This reward of the mercy and the forgiveness is really reserved for those who come physically to the masjid and sit in circles of dhikr of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. I am really hoping that people would come back and see the value of this. As far as this halaqah is concerned, obviously, even if one person attends, it will continue. It will continue regardless of how many attends. This is not a gauge of the success of the halaqah. On the contrary, the halaqah will continue, and I hope that the reward and the value and the benefit that comes out of this halaqah will continue, and people will continue to benefit from it. And I want to mention something that may not be something that we tend to think about, because obviously we typically consider the attendees are the ones that we physically see. But I wouldn't count out there are attendees that we may not actually be able to see with our physical eyes. Because as you know that like there are al-ins, there are also jinn that Allah Azza wa Jal created, and these are type of creation, and they are tasked like we are tasked. They are tasked like we are tasked. They are mukallafeen like we are mukallafeen. And this deen was sent to both worlds, al-thaqalain, al-ins wal-jinn. And they are addressed with the orders and the prohibitions like we are. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala sends only messengers from al-ins. But these messengers from al-ins are also messengers to al-jinn as well. And that's why al-anbiya wal-rusul alayhim as-salatu was-salam, when they were sent with their deen, with their religions, to both worlds. And al-jinn, the righteous from al-jinn, they used to come to the prophets, like they used to come to the Prophet alayhi salatu was-salam, and ask him, and they asked them before him alayhi salatu was-salam about the matters of the deen, to tafaqquh fi deen, and to know what is incumbent upon them. And they used to sit in the circles of knowledge. They used to come, and the Prophet ﷺ used to go out for them and answer their questions. And I don't know if you remember, in the class of Sirah, we discussed the event of when some of the jinn came, or they were passing, when Rasulullah ﷺ was coming back from Taif, and he was praying before entering or re-entering Mecca. He was praying in a valley called the Valley of Nakhla, Wadi Nakhla. And a group of the jinn were passing by, and they overheard the Quran. And this is what Allah Azza wa Jal talks about in the ayat toward the end of Surah Al-Ahqaf. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, وَإِذْ صَرَفْنَا إِلَيْكَ نَفَرًا مِنَ الْجِنِّ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقُرْآنَ فَلَمَّا حَضَرُوهُ قَالُوا أَنصِتُوا فَلَمَّا قُضِيَ وَلَّوْا إِلَى قَوْمِهِمْ مُنذِرِينَ قَالُوا يَا قَوْمَنَا إِنَّا سَمِعْنَا كِتَابًا أُنزِلَ مِنْ بَعْدِ مُوسَى مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ يَهْدِي إِلَى الْحَقِّ وَإِلَى طَرِيقٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ يَا قَوْمَنَا أَجِيبُوا دَاعِيَ اللَّهِ وآمنوا به يغفر لكم من ذنوبكم ويكفر عنكم سيئاتكم يا قومنا أجيبوا داعي الله وآمنوا برسوله يغفر لكم من ذنوبكم ويجركم من عذاب أليم ومن لا يجب داعي الله فليس بمعجز في الأرض وليس له من دونه أولياء أولئك في ضلال مبين. The meaning of which, as mentioned, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when we directed to you a few of the jinn listening to the Quran, and when they attended it, they said, listen quietly. And when it was concluded, they went back to their people as warners. So we see that there are also du'at from al-jinn, those who believe and those who are righteous, and the other world is like our world. Some of them are righteous and some of them are not. And that's why Allah Azza wa Jal described them for us in Surah Al-Jinn, which is titled after them. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala said, وَأَنَّا مِنَّا الصَّالِحُونَ وَمِنَّا دُونَ ذَلِكَ. And some of us are righteous and some of us are otherwise, يعني deviant and sinners and disobedient, etc. كُنَّا طَرَائِقَ قِدَدًا, يعني we were different groups and different يعني directions. Some of them are righteous and some of us are not. وَأَنَّا مِنَّا الْمُسْلِمُونَ وَمِنَّا الْقَاسِطُونَ. And some of us are Muslim, those who submitted to the will of Allah Azza wa Jal, and some of us are يعني those who are يعني they diverted from the path of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So the point is that they have a need, or they have the right to learn the deen like we have a need. And I hope that يعني these majalis are also attended by them and they benefit from these majalis and from this halaqat, and they learn from يعني our knowledge and from our spreading of the knowledge. And I hope that they also go back to their people as du'at, warners, mundhirin, and mubashirin, and they preach to them what we learn in this halaqat. But what I wanted to say is really that it feels sad that the numbers are not as much as they used to be, and people aren't interested in learning and being patient and sitting in these circles of knowledge as they used to be. That is not a good sign. That is not a good sign. I hope that we reconsider, and Allah Azza wa Jal gives us the tawfiq to actually see the value and see the benefit of these majalis al-ilm, and that they are a great quruba to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And for as long as you sit in these majalis al-ilm and these majalis al-dhikr, you are in a continuous ibadah. You are in a continuous ibadah to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. طيب, without further ado, last Saturday we talked about, and I do apologize that the projector is still not working. Allah musta'an. I'd love to actually show you what we're commenting on like we used to, but may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rectify our situation and get us going. Last Saturday we talked about, or we commented about the 17th principle. The 17th principle of the principles of glorifying knowledge, which the Sheikh titled as الذب عن العلم والذود عن حياضه, to protect and to defend the knowledge and to protect its sources, which are the scholars and the books. And he mentioned about many things, that there is a sanctity and there is a sacredness to the knowledge. That's why it ought to be defended and it ought to be protected. He mentioned several ways of doing that. Sheikh mentioned about refuting the opposers, al-mukhalifin. Anybody who opposes the Sharia comes up with an opinion that is not in line with the Sharia, and it becomes public, and he spreads it or she spreads it, and it becomes people are dealing with it, and some of them may be even misled with it. Then it is incumbent upon us, no matter who that person may be, we ought to refute that and point it out and correct people and point it out to people that this is wrong, and this is from al-nasiha, and this is from defending and from protecting ad-deen. So nobody should take offense in why are you talking about this person or that person, or why are you talking or refuting such a person. We don't do this we don't actually make it a business that we do that. And you notice that we don't do it all the time. But when it is necessary to point that out, we will not shy away from that. We will not shy away from calling out something that is wrong, calling out somebody who is spreading falsehoods, or spreading opinions that are against the Sharia or opposing the Sharia. We're not going to shy away from doing that. And there is nothing, without attacking the person personally. We're not taking down any person. We're not attacking the opposer personally. and we're doing this with etiquette and with manners, like the scholars have always done. And we quoted the Imam Ahmad that لم يزل الناس يرد بعضهم على بعض. And people have always done that, and they continue to refute one another or correct one another and address what they see. I'm talking about the scholars, obviously, what they see as wrong. Also, from the ways of defending Sharia, he talked about boycotting the innovators, because this is the way to discipline them. Innovators are not to be befriended, they are not to be to mingle with them or to take from them, but rather it has always been, and we mentioned that this is actually a consensus. Abu Ya'la al-Farra, he mentioned it as a consensus among all the scholars all along A'immat al-Islam, that what should be done to the innovators is that they should be boycotted. Also, he mentioned about scolding the students and disciplining students of knowledge, and refrain from teaching them if they exhibit anything that is not respectful to the knowledge and to the Sharia. If they do anything, if they don't show discipline, and if they don't show etiquettes of the ilm, then it is from the right of the teacher and from the right of the Sheikh to actually say, I'm going to punish you by refraining from teaching you. Because if somebody is sitting in a circle of knowledge or in a sitting of knowledge, and they're not showing respect to the knowledge, then they don't deserve to be taught in the first place. And from the ways that the Salaf al-Saleh, rahimahumullah ta'ala, that they used to discipline their students, and Sheikh, if you remember, we talked about several examples, they actually packed up and left, literally, right? They would stand up and put their shoes on, and they would leave and go back to their homes. He talked about Abdurrahman ibn Mahdi, one of the great scholars of al-Hadith, and he also mentioned Waki' ibn al-Jarrah, one of the great scholars and a'immat and huffaz al-Hadith. If he disliked something from those who were sitting in his majlis, he would just stand up and leave, and not teach them. This is one of the ways of tarbiyah, and one of the ways of التعليم. And he mentioned also, if you remember, he talked about Majlis Sufyan al-Thawri, and I think this is where we reached last time, where one of the youngsters, a young person, was in the majlis, and he started to talk like, as if he is peer to the most senior, like Sufyan al-Thawri. And he scolded him, and he disciplined him, and he said, go away from my majlis, and I don't want to see you anywhere near my majlis. قُمْ عَنِّي وَلَا أَرَاكَ تَدْنُو مِنْ مَجْلِسِي. And I don't want to see you even near my majlis. Why? Because he's actually treating himself, and he was a youngster, right? Just starting in the knowledge, as they say, a newbie in the ilm, and he want to show off and show arrogance in his knowledge in the presence of al-a'imma. And we mentioned that they used not to talk in front of al-mashayikh and the scholars and the people of knowledge until they had sought knowledge for 30 years. That's 30 years before even claiming knowledge or claiming al-imama in the deen, or being presented as a scholar or a person of knowledge. طيب. I think this is where we reached last Saturday. تفضل.
قال المصنف وفقه الله: وإن احتاج المعلم إلى إخراج المتعلم من مجلسه زجرا له فليفعل، كما فعل سفيان وكما كان يفعل شعبة مع عفان بن مسلم في درسه. وقد يزجر المتعلم بعدم الإقبال عليه وترك إجابته، فالسكوت جواب. قال الأعمش: ورأينا هذا كثيرا من جماعة من الشيوخ، منهم العلامة ابن باز، فربما سأله سائل عما لا ينفعه فترك الشيخ إجابته وأمر القارئ أن يواصل قراءته، أو أجابه بخلاف قصده.
Now, so the Sheikh continued by mentioning also what are some of the things that the scholars have done in defense of Sharia. Now remember, we're still talking about this principle, which is to protect and defend Sharia. So some of the ways also that can be used to discipline people in protection or in protecting Sharia is وَإِنْ احْتَاجَ الْمُعَلِّمِ. And if the teacher, يعني teacher of the knowledge, a scholar, a sheikh, a teacher, and if they have a need, وَإِنْ احْتَاجَ الْمُعَلِّمِ إِلَى إِخْرَاجِ الْمُتَعَلِّمِ مِنْ مَجْلِسِهِ, if it comes down to that they need to يعني ask that person who is sitting in their majlis to leave the majlis, because this is what is better for him and for them, for the rest of those attendees in the majlis. وَإِنِ احْتَاجَ الْمُعَلِّمِ إِلَى إِخْرَاجِ الْمُتَعَلِّمِ مِنْ مَجْلِسِهِ زَجْرًا لَهُ, to discipline him, فَلْيَفْعَلْ, then let him do that. So one of the things that the teachers and the scholars and the people of knowledge do is, if there's somebody sitting in the majlis and he is not respectful or doing something that is contrary to the etiquette of the majlis or etiquette to the sacredness and the sanctity of the knowledge, then they may be asked to go out, to go away and to leave. This is one of the ways to discipline them. زَجْرًا لَهُمْ, right? To discipline them. To إلى إخراج المتعلم, يعني to ask them to leave. Because this is from protecting the knowledge and from defending it. From protecting the knowledge and from defending it. كما فعل سفيان. Like Sufyan al-Thawri did. And remember, we talked about this last Saturday. Remember when we were talking, and I just briefly mentioned it. When a young man, a shab, حضر مجلس سفيان الثوري, and he started to act like he is the most senior of the one in the majlis, in the presence of Sufyan al-Thawri. So he actually kicked him out. He said, قم عني, يعني leave. He asked him to leave and to exit from the majlis. ولا أراك, and I don't want to even see you again. وكما كان يفعله شعبة مع عفان بن مسلم في درسه. And like also شعبة. Who is شعبة? We mentioned him several times. Not once, not twice, several times. We mentioned him several times. Who is شعبة? شعبة بن الحجاج أبو بسطام, أمير المؤمنين في الحديث. We have to remember this. Yeah, remember this? أمير المؤمنين في الحديث. This is what they used to call him. شعبة ibn al-Hajjaj, Abu Bustam. Remember who used to expose every liar? He would go in the marketplace and say, Ya ayyuhan nas, oh people, this guy lies on the Prophet ﷺ. He fabricates on him. In defense of what? Sharia. Yeah, some people say, oh, why is he doing that? Imagine if he didn't do that. Imagine if he didn't do that. What would have happened? We can't tell the difference between hadith and a fabricated hadith. This is what would have happened if they didn't do that. And the like of him, if they did not expose the liars, the hadith of Rasulullah would have been lost, and we wouldn't be able to tell between a hadith sahih and a hadith mawdu', fabricated. This is how to defend the Sharia, and there's nothing wrong in that. They're doing this in defense of Sharia, not to take a person personally down, not to take him down. But if he's lying, then there's no sacredness for that person. No hurma for him. You lie on the Prophet, you lie on Allah Azza wa Jal, you lie on the deen, then you have no sanctity. ما في حرمة. You've waived it by lying on Allah Azza wa Jal, by lying on His deen, by lying on the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. طيب. So شعبة كما كان يفعل, like شعبة ibn al-Hajjaj, Amir al-Mu'mineen in the hadith, like he used to do with Affan ibn Muslim. Affan ibn Muslim is also another scholar of hadith. He is Affan ibn Muslim ibn Abdillah al-Basri, يعني from al-Basra, Iraq. Al-Saffar. He was born in the year 143 Hijri. Was born in the year 143 Hijri. And he passed away, rahimahullah ta'ala, in the year 219 in Baghdad. Muhaddith, Hafiz. He was actually very dependable in the memorization. Who narrated from him? The Imam al-Bukhari. He narrated from Affan ibn Muslim. He took from him. And he was a student of Shu'bah ibn al-Hajjaj. So he disciplined him several times while he was sitting in the majlis of Shu'bah. He disciplined him several times by asking him to leave the majlis. This is how they raised a'imma in the deen. That's how you raise a'imma in the deen. This is how you raise scholars. Then he said, وَقَدْ يُزْجَرُ الْمُتَعَلِّمِ. Also, what can be done, يعني what the scholars and the people of knowledge can do to discipline and to defend the Sharia, is by scolding somebody, a seeker of knowledge, بِعَدَمِ الْإِقْبَالِ عَلَيْهِ وَتَرْكِ إِجَابَتِهِ. If somebody, a seeker of knowledge or a person of knowledge, if they ask a question that is not showing respect to the Sharia, that is not showing respect to the knowledge, then they may discipline them by refusing to answer them. And this is from the ways of disciplining people. Some people typically tend to think that if somebody asks a question, then it has to be answered. It does not have to be answered. And it is from the right of the mufti or the right of the scholar or the sheikh to choose, if he sees fit, not to answer the question. And this is from the ways of defending Sharia. Not every question has or ought to be answered. And it is at the discretion of the scholar. If he doesn't see it fit to answer, then he may refuse to answer. And that's what he's saying in here. وَقَدْ يُزْجَرْ زَجْرِ الْمُتَعَلِّمِ, يعني from scolding and disciplining the student of knowledge, بِعَدَمِ الْإِقْبَالِ إِلَيْهِ, by turning away from him, وَعَدَمِ إِجَابَتِهِ, and not answering him. فَالسُّكُوتُ جَوَابٌ, remaining silent and not answering is actually an answer. So answer is not always by actually explicitly answering something. By refusing to answer, that's an answer as well. Like Al-A'mash, well, also from the scholars of Al-Hadith, he said sukut, remaining silent and not answering a question, that's an answer. Because there is an indication in that what was asked is inappropriate and you shouldn't have asked about that. You see that? Remaining silent has an indication. If somebody asks a scholar about something and they refuse to answer, then they are in reality, they're answering that what you said or what you asked about is inappropriate and you don't have to ask about that. And that is why we're not answering you. And the Sheikh is saying that, and we have seen this a lot from a lot of our mashayikh, even contemporary one. And he mentioned in specifically Sheikh Al-Allama Ibn Baz, Samahat Al-Walid, Sheikh Ibn Baz, the ex-Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia, Sheikh Abdul Aziz Ibn Baz. He said sometimes فَلَرُبَّمَا or فَرُبَّمَا سَأَلَهُ سَائِل, sometimes he may be asked a question عَمَّا لَا يَنْفَعُهُ, something that has no benefit and there is no need to ask about this. And it is not from al-maslaha to ask about such a question, and he may leave off answering that as a way to teach, as a way to discipline. He may leave off answering that, and he would order or instruct the host who is asking or reading the question to continue and read the next question and skip that question and not answer it, or to answer it in a different way that would be beneficial to the one who is asking and not directly answer the question that was asked. And subhanAllah, as I was actually preparing for this class, I ran into a very short clip on YouTube about exactly this from Sheikh Ibn Baz rahimahullah ta'ala. I want to share this with you, and I wish that we had a better way of actually showing it to you. This is a very short clip. So Sheikh Ibn Baz, while he was alive, obviously, it looks like this was a program back in the days. Now, obviously, this is a couple of decades old. It looks like it's a program on the radio. So there's the host who's reading the question to the Sheikh, and the Sheikh is answering. So somebody asked a question about the permissibility of the Sharia of an Insi marrying a Jinni. So the Sheikh refused to answer. Like, what is that? It's actually a half minute. It's not nothing. I wanted actually to show you and translate what he actually said. So the host of the program, he's reading the question. He's saying that somebody asked about the hukum of the Sharia about الزواج الإنسي من الجن, يعني somebody from al-ins marrying somebody from al-jinn. So the Sheikh, so he said, the Sheikh, after praising Allah Azza wa Jal, after Hamdulillah, and as-salah upon the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, I have nothing to say about this, and I haven't seen in the books of the scholars anything about that, and I don't advise to ask about it because there is no benefit in that, and then he skipped. What kind of a question is that? Subhanallah. So that question, that answer in itself is teaching. That ask about what benefits you, what brings you closer to Allah Azza wa Jal. Don't ask about something that is not beneficial for you. Where's the benefit in that? Now, so this concludes this ma'qid, which is to defend Sharia, to defend the knowledge and the sources of the knowledge, which are the scholars and the books. Going to the next ma'qid. Now.
قال المصنف وفقه الله: المعقد الثامن عشر: التحفظ في مسألة العالم، فرارا من مسائل الشغب وحفظا لهيبة العالم، فإن من السؤال ما يراد به التشغيب وإيقاظ الفتنة وإشاعة السوء، ومن آنس منه العلماء هذه المسائل لقي منهم ما لا يعجبه، كما مر معك في زجر المتعلم، فلا بد من التحفظ في مسائل العالم، ولا يفلح في تحفظه فيها إلا من أعمل 4 أصول.
Now, so the Sheikh is saying in here, المعقد الثامن عشر, يعني the 18th principle. This is the 18th principle of the principles of glorifying knowledge, and he titled it التحفظ في مسألة العالم, يعني to preserve oneself by asking the scholars the appropriate questions. يعني while asking or when asking the scholar, a person have to look into what they are asking in preserving oneself and not to ask about anything just blindly. So التحفظ في مسألة العالم, to preserve oneself when asking when asking the scholar. And that is by asking about what's relevant to the person and what's beneficial to the person, and to ask about what brings them closer to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, about something that affects their behavior, something that affects their suluk to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. But asking about that which has no benefit whatsoever is not from glorifying the knowledge. So this is what this principle is about. He's saying firaran, why that is the case, out of running from يعني the matters that stir up evil. فرارا من مسائل الشغب. To run away, you have to look into what you're asking and to ask the correct questions and the beneficial questions out of running away from stirring up evil. وحفظا لهيبة العالم, and out of preserving the honor and the respect and to protect يعني the scholar's honor. فإن من السؤال ما يراد به التشغيب وإيقاظ الفتنة وإشاعة السوء. For some of the questions that people ask, especially some seekers of knowledge and some يعني students of knowledge, for some of those questions, what is meant by it? They ask those questions not to learn, not to increase their knowledge, but rather what is meant is to stir up evil and ignite tribulations. وإثارة الفتنة أو إيقاظ الفتنة, to wake up and ignite tribulations. وإشاعة السوء, and to spread evil, and to spread evil. This is what their intention from asking the question. Not to really learn and يعني further their understanding. And this is wrong. ومن آنس منه العلماء هذه المسائل لقي منهم ما لا يعجبه. And whoever the scholars sense or feel that this is what they intend from their question, will hear from them or will get from them that which they will dislike. Because they're not going to answer their question, and they're not going to say what they are expecting and what they like them to say, but rather they will actually refrain from either answering them or disciplining them and scolding them. So they will, if the scholars sense that this is why they're asking what they're asking about, then they will hear and get from them that which they don't like. ما لا يعجبه. كما مر معك في زجر المتعلم, like we've seen before in the previous maqid, in the previous principle, like we've seen before from the scolding of the scholars. Remember, Sufyan al-Thawri, Waki' ibn al-Jarrah, etc., etc. The scholars have scolded them and asked some people to leave their majalis because they were doing or asking and behaving in a way that is not respectful to the knowledge. So, like we've seen some of those examples, and even if the فلا بد من التحفظ في مسألة العالم, and a person should be careful while asking the scholar and what to look into what they are asking the scholar about. ولا يفلح في تحفظه فيها إلا من أعمل أربعة أصول. And to be able to to ask the beneficial questions and to observe this maqid and this principle, you have to recognize, or you have to be mindful of 4 fundamentals or 4 principles that the Sheikh is going to be talking about. So there are 4 things that he's going to mention which are incumbent upon the seeker of knowledge or somebody who is asking the scholars. They need to recognize or to be mindful of 4 fundamentals to clear oneself and to protect oneself when asking the scholars. طيب, the first one, تفضل.
قال المصنف وفقه الله: أولها الفكر في سؤاله لماذا يسأل، فيكون قصده من السؤال التفقه والتعلم لا التعنت والتهكم، فإن من ساء قصده في سؤاله يحرم بركة العلم ويمنع منفعته. وفي الناس من يسأل وله في سؤاله قصد باطن يريد التوصل به إلى مقصود له، فإذا غفل عنه المفتي وأفتاه بما يريد فرح به وأشاعه، وإذا تنبه إلى قصده حال بينه وبين مراده وزجره عن غيه.
نعم. كم.
قال القرافي في كتابه الإحكام: سئلت مرة عن عقد النكاح بالقاهرة هل يجوز أم لا؟ فارتبت وقلت له أي للسائل ما أفتيك حتى تبين لي ما المقصود بهذا الكلام، فإن كل أحد يعلم أن عقد النكاح بالقاهرة جائز. فلم أزل به حتى قال إنا أردنا أن نعقده خارج القاهرة فمنعنا. خارج القاهرة فمنعنا لأنه استحلال، يعني نكاح تحليل، وهو نوع من الأنكحة المحرمة. فجئنا للقاهرة فقلت له لا يجوز لا بالقاهرة ولا بغيرها.
نعم. So the Sheikh in here he started by talking about the first principle, the first fundamental that should be observed while asking a scholar or while asking the Sheikh. So he started by saying أولها, the first one of which is الفكر في سؤاله لماذا يسأل, to actually look into your question. In other words, to ask yourself, why am I asking this question to the Sheikh? So that's the first thing that one should do. Why am I asking this question to the Sheikh? What is my intention from that? Right? لماذا الفكر في سؤاله لماذا يسأل? Why am I asking? فيكون قصده, so that his قصد, his intention and the purpose of asking, من السؤال, from asking the question, التفقه والتعلم. So that the intention and the purpose of asking is to actually better your understanding, to further your knowledge, right? And get a better understanding. That should be the purpose of asking the question. So if a seeker of knowledge or a student of knowledge or any person in general, if you're asking a question, the first thing that you should ask yourself, why am I asking the question in the first place? What is my intention from asking that question? Is it to further my knowledge? And is it to get a better understanding? تفقه, يعني فقه المسألة of the matter? Is that the question? Is that the reason? Then if that is the intention, then sure. Because this is what it should have, what it should be, right? This is why I should be asking that question. لا التعنت ولا والتهكن. But it shouldn't be التعنت, stubbornness. Some people ask out of stubbornness because they want a specific answer. And they're expecting a specific answer, or to show that, for example, the scholar doesn't know, or he doesn't have a good understanding of that particular matter. So it shouldn't be out of stubbornness or التهكم, which is mockery and sarcasm. Some people ask a question to put the Sheikh on the record, because they know what they're going to answer, and they want them to put them, to hold them on the record, if you wish. And that should never be the intention of asking. فإن من ساء قصده, for the person who asks with an evil intention, like those, تعنت والتهكم, out of stubbornness and out of sarcasm. If that is the intention, then this is قصد سيء. فمن ساء قصده, whose قصد is سيء, whose intention is evil, في سؤاله, in his question, يحرم بركة العلم. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. They will be deprived from the blessing of the knowledge, so they won't benefit from it. You're not asking a question for your benefit. You're not asking a question because it actually is relevant to you or your situation, or there's something that truly you didn't understand and you're trying to get a better handle of it. You're only doing that out of stubbornness or out of sarcasm, And if that is the case, then you will be deprived from barakat al-ilm. وَيُمْنَعُ مَنْفَعَتُهُ, and they will not get its benefit. Al-ilm, lil-manfa'a, to benefit from it. Those people will not benefit from it. Those people will not actually take the benefit of the knowledge. They will not get the benefit of the knowledge. Nor will they be enjoying the blessing of that knowledge. On the contrary, they will be deprived. يحرم from al-hirman. نعوذ بالله من الحرمان. نعوذ بالله من الحرمان. They will be deprived from the barakah, from the blessing of the knowledge. وفي الناس, and it is pretty common among people, in the people it is common, من يسأل, those who ask, وله في سؤاله قصد باطن. They ask, but they have a hidden purpose of the question. قصد باطن, not so obvious. They have an intention, they have a purpose, they're asking for a reason that is hidden, باطن. يريد التوصل به إلى مقصود له. From that, he wants to get to a specific answer from that question. They want to get a specific answer from the person of knowledge. فإذا غفل عنه المفتي. So if the mufti, the scholar or the person of knowledge, if they don't notice that, if they don't see that this is why they're asking the question, غفل عنه المفتي وأفتى, and he gives them the fatwa, بما يريد, with what they want, because sometimes people, they're good in framing the question in a way that it attracts a specific answer. And this is exactly what they want. This is what they're looking for. So they hide certain details and they make certain aspects of the question so ambiguous so that they attract the answer that they were looking for and that they want. So if the mufti or the person of knowledge, if they don't notice that and their evil intention, وَأَفْتَاه, he gives him the fatwa with what they want, بِمَا يُرِيد, which is what the person asking was expecting, فَرِحَ بِهِ وَأَشَاعَ. He will be so happy, he will fly with it. He got the answer that he was hoping for. So they will fly with it, they will be so happy with it, and they will spread it. I asked the Sheikh this question, and this is what he answered me. See? This is what I told you. But they don't say that this is how I framed my question. And the mufti is a person, is a human being. Sometimes they may notice, and sometimes they may not. Sometimes people come to the scholar and they ask them when they are tired, when they are exhausted, when they are least focused, right? And they may win an answer from them, which is not what they would have answered with had they known what their intentions was or were. وَإِذَا تَنَبَّهَ إِلَى قَصْدِهِ, and if they notice what their real intention was, and by the way, if they actually, mufti, if they answer, they didn't notice the intention, the evil intention behind the question. And out of well-thinking, husn al-dhan, with the one who is asking, sa'il. And if they answer them, right, they're still not going to benefit from it. They're not going to benefit from it, and they're not going to get the blessings of that knowledge. It won't benefit them. وَإِذَا تَنَبَّهَ إِلَى قَصْدِهِ, and if they notice their evil intention, then they won't get them, or they won't give them what they wanted. So they will actually deprive them from getting the answer that they want and from giving them what they wanted. وَزَجْرُهُ عَنْ غَيْرِهِ حَالَ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ مُرَادِهِ وَزَجْرِهِ عَنْ غَيِّهِ. They will scold them and they will actually stop them from their error. الغي is الخطأ, error. And Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentioned this, this word was mentioned several times in the Quran. For example, Allah Azza wa Jal in Surah Al-A'raf, describing those who follow the whispers of shaitan and the traps of shaitan. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, وَإِن يَرَوْا سَبِيلَ الرُّشْدِ لَا يَتَّخِذُوهُ سَبِيلًا وإن يروا سبيل الغي يتخذوه سبيلا. يعني they will and if they see the way of consciousness, they will not adopt it as a way, but if they see the way of error, سبيل الغي, يعني the way of error, they will adopt it as a way. Because they don't receive the tawfiq of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. In another ayah, Allah Azza wa Jal says, Surah Al-A'raf also, وَإِخْوَانُهُمْ يَمُدُّونَهُمْ فِي الْغَيِّ ثُمَّ لَا يُقْصِرُونَ. But their brothers, their devils, or the devils increase them in error, then they do not stop short. So this way of having a hidden reason for ask, or a hidden evil intention to ask, the scholars who notice that, they will actually refrain them from doing that, and they won't answer them the answer that they were hoping for or expecting. Now he gives several examples that are pretty interesting, by the way. We're going to actually take a quick, quite some time talking about this particular example. Look at, it just gives you an idea of what people do and to what length they would be ready to go to solicit the answer that they are hoping for. To solicit the answer that they were hoping for. Al-Qarafi is one of the scholars. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he is a Hanafi scholar. Al-Qarafi is one of the scholars of Al-Ahnaf. قال القرافي في كتابه الإحكام. Al-Qarafi, he said in his book Al-Ihkam. The title of the book is Al-Ihkam. سئلت مرة عن عقد النكاح بالقاهرة هل يجوز أم لا. He's actually mentioning about a story that happened to him. Al-Qarafi, this is something that happened to him. And he's mentioning that story. What happened? Somebody came to him and he asked him about عقد النكاح, marriage contract. If it is done, if it was performed in Al-Qahira, which is Cairo, the capital of Egypt, right? Cairo, Al-Qahira. He was asked about عقد النكاح بالقاهرة, to perform a marriage contract in Al-Qahira. هل يجوز أم لا? Is it permissible or not? What kind of a question is that, right? I mean, why would it matter if it is in Al-Qahira or other than Al-Qahira? The validity or invalidity of the marriage contract has nothing to do with where, the place or the city, right? Or in the neighborhood where it was performed. It can be performed anywhere. So that's what made Al-Qarafi doubtful. فارتبت. He said فارتبت, يعني أصابني الريب. الريب is the doubt. So he had a feeling like, what? Why is he asking about that? It's a weird question, right? Why would anybody ask about a marriage contract performed in a particular city, Al-Qahira? Doesn't matter. If it meets the conditions, خلاص. It's a valid marriage contract. فارتبت وقلت له أي للسائل, and I said to the person who's asking, ما أفتيك حتى تبين لي ما المقصود بهذا الكلام. I will not give you notice. So in this case, Al-Qarafi, he noticed and he felt and sensed that there is something behind that question. It's not a sincere question. It's not a sincere question. So somebody came to him and he's asking about, performing عقد النكاح بالقاهرة. He felt something not right? So he sensed there is something. So he said, I said to the one who's asking me, ما أفتيك, I will not give you a fatwa. I will not tell you جائز or غير جائز until you clarify to me why are you asking this question. There's something behind it, right? There's something behind it. حتى تبين لي ما المقصود بهذا الكلام. What is your intention from asking such a question? فإن كل أحد يعلم. Everybody knows. You don't need to ask a mufti. Everybody knows أن عقد النكاح بالقاهرة جائز. Everybody knows. This is from the common knowledge. Al-Qahira or Hyderabad or Dar es Salaam or anywhere for that matter. It doesn't matter. Any عقد النكاح, if it meets the conditions, doesn't matter. Everybody knows أن عقد النكاح بالقاهرة جائز. So there's something behind that question. فلم أزل به حتى قال. So I kept insisting on him that he would tell me why he's asking that question, until he said to me, حتى قال إنا أردنا أن نعقده خارج القاهرة فمنعنا. He said to him, he confessed, يعني, in other words. In the end, after Al-Qarafi insisted on him, he confessed. He said, we wanted to perform this عقد النكاح outside of Al-Qahira, but we were denied. فمنعنا. We were prevented from doing that. لأنه استحلال. Because it is عقد استحلال. And I will mention what that means. I don't know if any one of you knows what that means. We have quite a bit to talk about that. But I will come back to this. So it is nikah called nikah al-tahleel, which is an invalid type of marriage contract. An invalid and impermissible. فاسد, غير صحيح. And it is a muharram. فجئنا للقاهرة. So we came to Al-Qahira, to Cairo. فقلت له. So Al-Qarafi, he said, if this is what you're asking about, now he confessed about exactly what he's asking about. Not just any marriage contract. Now we're talking about عقد النكاح التحليل, which is impermissible in Al-Qahira or other than Al-Qahira, or anywhere for that matter. It's invalid. Doesn't matter where. See now, really what the question was all about all along? But he didn't say this from the beginning. He said, what is the ruling on هل يجوز عقد النكاح بالقاهرة or not? But he didn't say that it is عقد تحليل. After insisting, he confessed, and he said it is actually a عقد تحليل. فhe said لا يجوز لا بالقاهرة ولا بغيرها. It's not permissible to do عقد تحليل, neither in Al-Qahira nor anywhere else or outside of Al-Qahira. So this is the answer. Now imagine if Imam Al-Qarafi did not notice what the guy intended from this. And he took it on its face value. Somebody asking him about عقد نكاح بالقاهرة. Yeah, يجوز. What would that person have done? He would fly with that answer and you say, oh, I asked Al-Qarafi about عقد النكاح بالقاهرة and he said it is جائز. You know what I'm saying? This is what would have happened. He is not going to say that I asked him about عقد التحليل. He's going to say, I asked Al-Qarafi, the Imam, about the permissibility of performing عقد النكاح in Al-Qahira, and he said it is permissible. That's what people do. That's what people do. And similar to that, you hear what will turn your hair gray. People would actually go to extreme length at deceiving the al-mufti and framing the answer, or the question, framing the question in a way that will solicit what they actually wanted, and it's an evil intention. They're not being sincere in their asking, in their question. They're not being sincere. And this is not from respecting or from glorifying the knowledge. Glorifying the knowledge, it means that you actually precisely ask the question in a sincere way, in a clear way, unambiguous way, right? That is beneficial to you, that would actually benefit you. What is عقد التحليل? عقد التحليل is, as you know, a person in Islam is given the option of taking back his wife after divorcing her twice. After divorcing a wife twice, a man, a husband, still has the option of taking his wife back, right? Because even after divorcing her twice, she's not divorced. She's, in the light of Sharia, she's still a wife, and she doesn't even need to leave the house. And she's still has all the rights of a wife, as Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, الطلاق مرتان فإمساك بمعروف أو تسريح بإحسان. Divorce is twice. After that, either you retain her on reasonable terms, because she's still a wife, she's not divorced, So either after 2, you either retain her on reasonable terms, فإمساك بمعروف, تمسك الزوجة بمعروف, or you let her go. أو تسريح بإحسان, or you release her with kindness. And this is what's called طلاق الرجعي. طلاق الرجعي يعني جائز إرجاع الزوجة بعده. Up to 2. You still can ترجع الزوجة. She's not divorced, right? That's why it's called طلاق رجعي, يعني revocable divorce. I'm sorry? If the husband divorced her a 3rd time, now she's completely divorced. If he divorces her a 3rd time, then she becomes haram for him to return. She becomes haram for him, and it is not permissible for him to marry her, not even with a new marriage contract and a new mahr, unless she marries a second person, a marriage that is legitimate and correct marriage, a valid and genuine marriage, and then the second husband who marries her consummates the marriage, right? And then after that, if he divorces her or he passes away and leave her as a widow, then the first husband can take her back if she agrees to that, if both of them agree to that, on a new marriage contract and with a new mahr. But that is not permissible unless she marries a second person, a legitimate and valid and genuine marriage. That's why Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says in the following ayah of Surah Al-Baqarah, فَإِن طَلَّقَهَا, يعني a 3rd time. Because in the previous ayah he said, الطلاق مرتان. Divorce is twice. Then in the following ayah he said, فَإِن طَلَّقَهَا, يعني طلقة ثالثة, a 3rd time. Then فلا تحل له من بعد حتى تنكح زوجا غيره فإن طلقها فلا جناح عليهما أن يتراجعا إن ظنا أن يقيما حدود الله وتلك حدود الله يبينها لقوم يعلمون. And if he has divorced her, يعني a 3rd time, then she is not lawful unto him thereafter until she has married another husband. Then if the other husband divorces her, it is no sin on both of them that they reunite, provided that they feel that they can keep the limits ordained by Allah Azza wa Jal. These are the limits of Allah which He makes plain for the people who have knowledge. So after a 3rd divorce, they're completely divorced. And after that, it would require a new marriage contract and a new mahr, but only after she marries a second person. A genuine and legitimate contract or marriage. If after that she's divorced or he passes away, then they can remarry after that on a new contract. Now, what is zawaj al-tahleel? What is zawaj al-tahleel? Zawaj al-tahleel is actually a trick that people do just in the form that she married somebody else, not because they want to marry, but just as a way to marry somebody else, and then the agreement is to divorce so that she can marry the first husband again. And that is from the most serious sins, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. And it doesn't actually do what they think it does. It doesn't make the wife halal for the first husband, because it's not a valid marriage contract. This marriage, which is called a tahleel, why is it called a tahleel? Because they think it actually makes the first husband halal again for her. يعني يحل الزوج الأول to marry her, to remarry her. But it doesn't. It is not permissible for the man who issued that divorce, right? Or for the woman to use a trick to get around the limits of the deen of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and around the laws of Allah Azza wa Jal, so that they can get back together by means of what is called this marriage of a tahleel. which takes several forms. One of them is where the husband who had issued the divorce or the woman or her guardian, wali amriha, hire a person, literally, that's what it is, to be frank with you. They hire a person, come, and the agreement that they stipulate that he must marry the divorced woman and consummate the marriage with her, and then divorces her, and they give him a sum of money in return for their effort. That's not a legitimate marriage contract, and it doesn't make the first husband halal to remarry her again. Or a man marries the divorced woman without making any agreement with anybody, but really his intention is to make her permissible for the first husband, and then he divorces her. It's just apparently they get married, but in reality it's just to make the first husband halal for her. And this nikah at-tahleel is fasid and aqd muharram. It is an impermissible marriage contract and invalid, and those who do that, they actually deserve to be cursed, as hadith Rasulullah ﷺ tells us. They ought to be cursed, and this is actually a major sin. Major sin who do that, it is actually a major sin. Rasulullah ﷺ said that any person who does that, they deserve to be cursed. And the fact that they deserve to be cursed tells us, the scholars have derived from that it is actually a major sin. And they indicate, the hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, they indicate that this marriage of at-tahleel is haram, and it is a major sin, and also indicate that it is not valid. So it does not really make the first husband halal to remarry the woman. And this opinion, by the way, that it is an invalid and haram contract of marriage, it is actually the opinion of the majority of the scholars, the Malikis, the Shafi'is, and the Hanbalis, and Abu Yusuf among the Hanafis. They all see this are with the view that this kind of marriage is invalid. Because the marriage of purpose of tahleel, for the purpose of tahleel, comes under the same heading as temporary marriage. Any marriage that is time limited. Somebody comes and say, I want to marry you, but for a period of month, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. That's not a valid marriage contract. And this is similar to it. Because really, the second person only married for a certain period of time with the intention that they're going to get divorced so that she go back to the first husband. So this is comparable analogy to that. There's an analogy to that time limited. A marriage that is time limited. And that's why they said it is impermissible. And anything that stipulates that a marriage is to be temporary renders it invalid. And as long as it is an invalid marriage contract, it really doesn't make the woman halal for the first husband. Because remember what we said. Al-ayah is if the person divorces his wife after a third time, she's divorced. And they cannot go back together unless she marries a second person. And we mentioned several times that second marriage has to be a valid marriage. If it is not a valid marriage, like this marriage of a tahleel, then she does not become halal for the first husband. And those tricks that people do, it doesn't make the woman halal to get married back to the first husband. So there's no tahleel that occurs out of that marriage. Not only that, it is so serious that unfortunately a lot of people do it, to be frank with you, and they don't realize or they don't appreciate the severity of what they're doing. Sheikh Abdulaziz ibn Baz, we mentioned him a little bit earlier, the ex-Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia. He said, when he was asked about this, he said, this is one of the most abhorrent kinds of falsehood and one of the gravest kinds of corruption. He is in effect an adulterer. If he remarries the wife, he is an adulterer because that marriage is not valid. That contract marriage is not valid because he did not marry her so that she could become a wife to him and keep him chaste and stay with him, and so that he might hope to have children from her. No, rather he came as a borrowed billy goat, to be frank with you, to make her permissible for the one who came before him by having intercourse with her once and then leaving her and finishing with her. This is the muhallil. His marriage is invalid and is not legitimate. And even the standing committee for issuing fatwa, she was asked about this, and she answered, if a man marries a woman on condition that it is to be for the purpose of tahleel, or he intends that, or they both agree to that, then the marriage contract is invalid and the marriage is not legitimate. So not a joke, not a light matter, but rather a very serious matter. But the point is, going back here, I wanted to give a brief description of that mas'ala, of that matter of al-tahleel, so that it is known, and for the benefit of it. But going back to the example that he gave, this is what that man came to al-Qarafi, and look how he framed his question. What he really framed the question as, is it allowed to perform a aqd nikah in al-Qahira? That's what he said in the beginning. Only after he confessed that he learned what exactly he meant by that. Similarly, Sheikh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he was asked about a matter related to the people of Ahl al-Dhimma, the people of the book, if they live under the rule of Islam. If a country or a place is ruled by Islam or Muslim leaders, and there are non-Muslim from the people of the book, Jews, Christians, right? They are called Ahl al-Dhimma, and they have some rulings that apply to them. So several people came to Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, and they asked him about it. And Ibn al-Qayyim, his student, he mentioned it in his book, I'lam al-Muwaqqi'in, that several people came and asked him about this matter. It doesn't specify what the matter is, but he was asked about exactly the same thing over and over again. And every time they would ask him in a different way. So they would frame the question in a different way, hoping that what? He would give a different answer, right? He would give them, oh yeah, it's okay. And every time he would say, la yajuz, la yajuz, it's not permissible, it's impermissible, it's still impermissible. No matter how you frame it, it's still impermissible. And the last time he was asked about it, he said, حتى قال في آخر مرة, in the last time he answered, he said, هي المسألة المعينة. It is exactly the same matter. You're changing it how you stated, but it's exactly the same matter. So it's not changing. وإن خرجت في عدة قوالب. And even if you frame it differently, it's still the same matter. So don't play tricks and don't keep framing it and asking it in a different way. It's still, if it is haram, it is still haram. لا يجوز, it remains لا يجوز. It is still impermissible. And if it is halal, it is halal. It remains the same thing, right? So it doesn't change. طيب. 5 minutes. 5 more minutes. طيب. I think we can do this. الأصل الثاني. Yeah, we can do this very quickly, inshallah. It's not a big one.
قال المصنف وفقه الله: أما الأصل الثاني فالتفطن إلى ما يسأل عنه فلا تسأل عما لا نفع فيه، إما بالنظر إلى حالك أو بالنظر إلى المسألة نفسها. سأل رجل أحمد بن حنبل رحمه الله تعالى عن يأجوج ومأجوج أمسلمون هم؟ فقال له: أحكمت العلم حتى تسأل عن ذا؟ ومثله السؤال عما لا يقع أو ما لا يحدث به كل أحد، وإنما يخص به قوم دون قوم.
طيب. So he said الأصل الثاني, the second foundation, that needs to be observed when asking a question. Again, remember we're talking about to be careful about what you ask about. So with respect to that, the second principle he's saying, التفطن إلى ما يسأل عنه, to be aware of what you're asking about, right? The first one was to ask yourself, why are you asking? What is your intention of asking that question? The second principle is to actually be aware of what you're asking about. In other words, is it beneficial to me or not? Is it something that is worth asking about or not? Does this concern me in my situation, or does it increase or further or better my understanding and my fiqh in the deen or not? And if it doesn't, if there is no value in it, then again I shouldn't be asking about it. التفطن إلى ما يسأل عنه. What should be asked about? فلا تسأل عما لا نفع فيه. So don't ask about that which there's no benefit in asking about. There's no benefit in it. لا نفع فيه. Why do you ask about it? إما بالنظر إلى حالك, either by looking at your situation and whether it applies to you, أو بالنظر إلى المسألة نفسها, or by looking at the matter itself. Is it something that has value to the people? Is it something that there is benefit in learning it and in asking about it? And if not, then you shouldn't be asking about it. He's giving an example about that. So what kind of question that has no benefit in it? سأل رجل, a man asked أحمد بن حنبل رضي الله عنه, الإمام المشهور, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. A man came to Ahmad ibn Hanbal and asked him about Ya'juj wa Ma'juj. You know, the people who were mentioned in the Quran. He said, أَمُسْلِمُونَهُمْ? Are they Muslim or are they not Muslim? How is that beneficial? He said, so Imam Ahmad, look what he answered. He didn't answer his question. He answered him with another question. He said, أَحْكَمْتَ الْعِلْمَ حَتَّى تَسْأَلْ عَنْ هَذَا? Did you understand all of the knowledge, and did you acquire all of the knowledge, and you have the knowledge of all the matters that really are beneficial to you and they matter to you, so that now you're asking about Ya'juj wa Ma'juj, are they Muslim or not? There's no benefit in that question. There's no benefit in that question. Similarly, for example, in the Surah Yusuf, Allah Azza wa Jal tells us about the story of Yusuf and what he went through, right? When his siblings, they left him in the well, right? And they deserted him, right? And then a caravan of people, they went by and they wanted to get water, and then they found this young man, right? So they purchased him, they bought him, and Allah Azza wa Jal told us what? وَشَرَوْهُ بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ دَرَاهِمَ مَعْدُودَةٍ وَكَانُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الزَّاهِدِينَ. They purchased him with a cheap price, a few darahim. He didn't tell us few darahim, 3 darahim, 5 darahim, 7, 9. So a person comes and say, how much? By how much did they purchase him? How does that matter? How does that benefit you? If it was 3 darahim or 5 darahim or 7 darahim, how does that benefit you? And what's the difference? If it were 3 darahim or 5 darahim, what is the difference with respect to you? What benefit do you get if you know? If there was a benefit, Allah Azza wa Jal would have told us. Would have told us. It wasn't mentioned because there's no value in that. There's no benefit. Why are you asking about that? By the way, you hear all kind of weird questions that has no value whatsoever. Is a shaitan married or not? Etc., right? Weird questions, no benefit whatsoever. Ask about ma yanfa'uk. Ask about what benefits you. What there is a value in it for you, what there is the benefit for you. And if there's no benefit, لا تسأل عما لا نفع فيه. Don't ask about what there is no benefit in it for you. Or similarly, to ask about, and I finish by this, سؤال عما لا يقع. Some people ask hypothetical questions. Something that will never happen. If we end up on Mars, how do we pray? Which direction do we pray? There was a question that actually was mentioned in one of the books. If the Imam turns into a chicken, is it allowed to continue the prayer behind him or not? Seriously, I'm not joking. This was one of the questions. Things that, hypothetical question, never happens. They don't occur, they don't happen. Why are you asking about it? There's no benefit in that. So this is the second principle, is to actually look into what you're asking about. Is it beneficial or is it not beneficial? Is it not beneficial or doesn't happen or there's no value in it? Then don't ask about it. This is the second principle. I think we're running out of time. Let's stop here and conclude it. Any question or concern quickly? No? طيب. أسأل الله لي ولكم العلم النافع. نعم تفضل.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على مولانا رسول الله. جزاك الله خير.
وإياك.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this majlis continue and benefit us and make the necessary inshallah effort so we can attend and have more mu'mineen attend inshallah.
Allahumma ameen.
So my question, I was wondering about Surah Al-Jinn.
نعم.
And clearly we all know Surah Al-Jinn, there is ayat clearly mentioning the relationship between ins and jinn.
نعم.
So in that aspect, the question that was asked to some scholar, the marriage, I know it's not a important question, but still you may wonder, what about the story that's mentioned in Surah Al-Jinn? Wallahu a'lam.
Story that was mentioned in Surah Al-Jinn.
When the Surah Al-Jinn, I don't recall the ayat in Surah Al-Jinn.
So there is a story that they came and heard the Quran. They listened to the Quran, and then they realized that there's only one deity worthy of worship, and then they were deceived by their chief who was directing them at worshipping other than Allah Azza wa Jal. But there's no Surah Al-Jinn. قل أوحي إلي أنه استمع نفر من الجن فقالوا إنا سمعنا قرآنا عجبا يهدي إلى الرشد فآمنا به ولن نشرك بربنا أحدا وأنه كان يقول سفيهنا على الله شططا, etc., etc. This ayah tells us about the jinn and about that there are righteous among them, and that there are those who are sinners and disbelievers in them, and that they were prevented from overhearing the news of the skies after the birth of the Prophet ﷺ. وَأَنَّ مِنَّا الصَّالِحُونَ وَمِنَّا دُونَ ذَلِكَ كُنَّا طَرَائِقَ قِدَدًا. From among us are the righteous and those who are not so righteous. نعم. And then they went as du'at for their people. But there is no mention of marrying between the jinn or the ins or anything like that.
Not exactly marriage, but there is mention of the ins and the jinn.
Yes, because there are two words. Right, absolutely. Just to tell us that there is another word that of the creation of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, and they are tasked like we are tasked. They are mukallafeen like we are mukallafeen. And that is why the ones who believe among them and the prophets and the messengers of al-ins are also messengers and prophets to the jinn as well. And those who believe from them and are righteous, they will be rewarded like the ins. And even from the jinn al-mu'min, they will enter into paradise like al-ins. And those who are disbelievers, they will be punished in hellfire like the disbelievers of al-ins. But there's nothing with respect to the marriage or anything like that. No. And this is not something that anybody should look into or ask about. And there's no marriage between the two worlds. No. جزاك الله خير. طيب.